Right, so I want to make a video updating everyone, getting right into it. Canada's up to 99,182 cases, 8,175 dead. Alberta, 35 new cases yesterday, up slightly to 449 active cases, up slightly to 36 in the hospital, but those numbers are still down as a whole. Um, the death rate, it continues to go down too. I think that's something that's important to point out. I'll get into that soon. But the main thing to point out is that, or the main thing to debunk the pro lockdown people is they are constantly pointing out, oh, we're having this second wave and all this kind of garbage. And they're going to be talking about a second wave for the next year. I mean, there will be a second wave at some point. Will it be bad and something we need to be all paranoid about? Definitely not. At least the evidence we have right now clearly points to that. So the problem is that they're saying, oh, we're having 35, 40 new cases a day. But what they're not telling you is that we're also testing a lot of people. If you look back at, mid to late March, we were having comparable numbers as we are today, but we are testing like 3 times less people. We're testing like 8,000 people a day now. Back then, we were testing like 2,000 people a day, if that. So the thing to point out is we're testing a lot more people, so of course we're going to discover more numbers. And the problem is that the pro lockdown crowd, and I don't mean to be so tribal. I don't like being tribal, but when one side is clearly right about something and one side is clearly wrong, you have to take a side. So the point being is that they're clearly wrong and they're literally doing, well, they're going to jump on whatever it takes to justify their paranoia and justify not having to admit they're wrong. And this is the real problem here is people are really just doing whatever it takes to not have to admit they're wrong. And that's the big problem. So getting into the cases of the states, now I've been talking about for over 2 weeks now that if there's no big spike in cases out of the states, then we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the lockdowns don't work, and there's no reason to not almost completely reopen. And the numbers clearly bear that out. Like the numbers clearly bear that out. Like, you know, George Floyd died during, I think it was one of the last 2 or 3 days of May, and you're looking at, let's see, 18, 23, 26,000 cases for those last few days. The last few days in the States, you have 21, you have 18, you have 27. So the numbers are almost exactly the same. So it's safe to say that the lockdowns had, I would say, next to no impact. I would say that the protests are linked to a slight uptick, but it is largely insignificant. It's literally like, comparing it to like a rounding error in that maybe there's a 5 to 10% increase, but a 5 to 10% increase on 20 new cases a day is not something we need to worry about. And the other reason we don't have to worry about it is they're largely young people who are getting it, and they're largely asymptomatic people that are getting it. So the people that are getting it are people that are a lot less likely to spread it and a lot less likely to have any health complications from it. So there's no reason whatsoever to worry about it. And this is the thing too, that if if the protests and people gathering in large crowds means that we're going to have an increase in cases, it needs to be obvious. It needs to be obvious. Like the states should be having 30, 40, 50,000 new cases a day, not almost exactly the same as what they were before. So it is safe to say that anybody with half a brain would recognize that the lockdowns have almost no impact on it. I think it's so small that it's almost not even possible to measure it to a degree. And that's one of the main problems, that I think it's almost not even possible to measure it, that it literally could be a rounding error. Like we're talking the difference between, like, look at Alberta, like 25, 20, 25, 30 new cases and 30, 35. So we're talking like the difference in like 5 cases a day. That's not something we need to be worried about at all. Um, so this is from Rand Paul, um, and he goes on to say, science does tell us the risks from the virus are too low, or sorry, too minimal to sacrifice the educational, social, emotional, and physical well-being to say nothing of the very health of our young people. And he links to a article out of the Hill and says, science says open the school. And again, you can debate it all you want, but the science clearly says that it's perfectly fine to open schools. It's perfectly fine to open society back up. The science overwhelmingly says that, especially for younger people. The death rate is lower than the flu. They're largely asymptomatic cases. Asymptomatic cases are much less likely to spread than we originally thought. So anybody who's still worried about this, it just goes to show that you are paranoid. You are a delusional, paranoid, tinfoil hat wearing kind of person. Like seriously. And I don't mean to be mean to people, but seriously, like it's getting very, very insane. And like, honestly, I'm starting to be concerned for some of these people that they still are so paranoid about this kind of stuff. Like, and it goes for the government too. Like the fact that they're not admitting that I mean, they've admitted they've been wrong about most things, just not directly. But why hasn't the government came out and said, yeah, we've been wrong about pretty much everything so far. Sorry, guys, we made you stay home and shut down your business for no reason. Sorry. Like, is that going to take away all the pain and suffering? Absolutely not. But at least we know that they can admit when they're wrong, because people that can't admit they're wrong are terrible, terrible people, like terrible people, and they don't deserve to be trusted. And that's pretty much everyone in government right now. Um, so anyway, like I say too, Rand Paul literally is a doctor who had the virus. So if anybody's qualified to speak on this, it's him. And this is the problem: is that you have these idiot, most largely people on the left, who think, like CNN was talking about it. Rand Paul is not qualified. He's a medical doctor who's had the virus. Aside from like literally the world's, like, if you took a million people, there's maybe one person who's more qualified to talk about this than Rand Paul is. And yet we have the mainstream media talking about, like, he has no idea what he's talking about. He's not qualified. Like, what are you talking about? They're the same people who had Greta Thunberg come on talk about this when she doesn't even know anything about the topic she's most known for. Like, seriously, like, the argument from them is literally, if you agree with us, you're an expert. If you disagree with us and an expert, oh, yeah, still means you're a kook. Like, again, these people are so insane, it's not even funny. Um, so anyway, this is from Scott Adams, and this is something I brought up, but I wanted to talk about it some more. He says every news story about the rise in virus infection rates that doesn't start by telling you the death rate is falling is fake news, is designed to manipulate you. And again, the mainstream media is just manipulating you. They tell you, oh, there is a slight rise in infection, but what they don't tell you is that, number one, um, a lot of it is due to the fact that we're just increasing our testing. And the other thing they're not telling you is that they're discovering a lot more asymptomatic cases, which means the death rate is falling below even what it was. Like I say, this is another prediction, actually two predictions I want to make. I mean, one I've been talking about for a while. Number one is that I believe that before this is all said and done, the death rate will be lower than the flu for people that are under the age of around 50 to 60 and have no underlying serious health conditions. I'd be comfortable betting money on that. Not a lot, but I do think it is more likely than not that that will come out. And we're already very close to that, so it's not going on a limb in any way. And the other thing that I wanted to make a prediction on is, um, I think that there will be a very strong push to re-lock down. Now, do I think it'll happen or not? I wouldn't say for sure, but I do think that there will be a very strong push to re-lock things down. So anyway, those are my predictions. This is from CTV, but this is something that came out about a week ago, not quite. And feds mandating temperature checks at airports, extending military deployments. Now, again, this is just again another example of the government admitting they were wrong about something, and just a classic example of too little, too late. That what are we doing? We waited over 3 months to increase our security at the airports. Like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? The other problem too with the whole temperature checks thing is I don't think it's completely a foolproof system, in that if you're asymptomatic, you're not gonna have I mean, you're not gonna have a fever by definition. So this is the problem, that it won't even catch everyone. Now again, asymptomatic people, you don't really have to worry about that much because they're a lot less likely to spread. but there's still something you should be worried about to a degree, especially coming from other countries. So yeah, like it's just another example of the government being wrong. Again, people like me talking about it at the time, how wrong they were, getting raked over the coals, and yet is there an apology? Like, where's the apology from the government being like, yeah, we were calling you guys kooks and crazies, 3 months ago when you're telling us we should have did this, and now, yeah, we admit we're wrong. This is just another example of admitting they're wrong. The porters don't work, security at airports don't work, masks don't work. And again, now there's a strong push to make masks mandatory. You should be forced to wear a mask. I've seen people say, yeah, I was talking to this person on Reddit the other day, and Reddit's largely a leftist echo chamber, but I try to push back on it a little bit in that there's a topic of should we make masks mandatory, and obviously, because it's a leftist echo chamber, most people were on board. And I talked to this one person, and eventually I got them to say, yeah, I think, they thought that we're going to have to be forced to wear masks for the next year or two, maybe longer, they said. So again, this is the problem that they say, oh, well, when you tell people whether or not you should make masks mandatory, most people think of it as, oh, maybe for the next month or two, but in reality, they want to make you wear a mask for years. And that's the other thing too, is that government stuff like that always takes long. It's like the classic, we're going to be in and out of Iraq in like 2, 3 months, whatever it was, and 20 years later, or almost 20 years later, they're still going, right? So this is the same thing. That the minute you let the government be able to force you to do something like this, they're going to take it. Not only are they going to take advantage of that, they're going to push harder than that. They're okay. Now we can force you to wear a mask. What else can we force you to do? Again, the people are so naive and stupid that they think that they're just going to stop at this. Like, no. Um, my position on masks has been right the whole time. I think the science clearly bears it out, and I mean, I think most experts probably would agree in that. Even, I mean, the government's basically admitted it too. Like anyone debating, oh, you're not an expert, what do you know? Well, it doesn't matter. Like the literal experts have came out and agreed with me, and that I said at the time when they said, "Oh, masks don't work, don't wear a mask," that yeah, you should wear a mask if you're sick. That masks do have some positive effect, but they're not a foolproof system. The problem with masks, especially I've seen the topic of people, you shouldn't be able to go to a gym if you're not wearing a mask. Well, here's the problem with that is that I've seen videos of guys working out in gyms where they force you to wear a mask. Almost everyone is touching their face, is taking it on and off, because when you're working out in a gym, especially this time of year, it's going to be hot. You're going to be sweating a lot, which means you're not gonna that wearing a mask is not going to be comfortable. Um, and this is the thing that Tam brought up, and I think she's right about it to an extent. She used it as justification that you shouldn't wear a mask at all, which I think is wrong. But in that masks only work if you don't touch your face. If you touch your face, they don't work. And that's the problem that these idiots don't seem to understand is that people are going to touch their face, especially in the summer. Like it's hot out. Like of course you're going to be touching your face. So the position on masks is very obvious in that you should suggest. I mean, people who are sick absolutely should be wearing it. Should they be forced to wear it? No. But should they be socially shamed? Yes. Um, but should people who aren't sick be forced to wear them? No, because there is negative effects to wearing a mask too. It will downregulate your immune system. It makes it harder to breathe, which isn't good for you, which is going to add more stress to your life. If you make it harder to breathe, it is adding more stress on your body by definition. So again, the mask position is very obvious. It just bothers me so much that people it's either one end of the spectrum or not. It's you shouldn't wear a mask, don't wear a mask, or you should be forced to wear a mask for the next 2 years, like garbage like that. Like, come on, there is an obvious middle ground, people. And again, the main point here being is that the government completely wrong on everything. Nobody should trust the government, even the provincial governments. I don't trust the Kennys of the world, the guy in Saskatchewan seems half decent. Kenny's half decent. I mean, Kenny at least admits the truth about a lot of things. He just refuses to put his money where his mouth is. And I understand too that no matter what he does, he's going to have massive backlash. If people die because of reopening, he'll take the blame. If people die because of not reopening, he'll take the blame. But I understand that. But the problem being is that you're losing more by keeping things closed, because the only way, I mean, the way that he loses the election is by losing the support of the middle class. Well, how do you lose the support of the middle class? Well, you destroy their businesses. You take people from the middle class and put them in the lower classes. So that's how he's going to lose. And I don't think he's going to lose. I'm just saying that's how it could happen. And another thing from Zuby Music here, and that he says, I'm one of the most optimistic people you'll ever meet, but the past few months have had me feeling despondent about humanity and where it could be heading. Barely anybody seems to get it either, which makes it that much worse. I keep the faith though. And again, this is a very good way of putting it. The Zuby Music guy is very articulate. I really like how he makes these points. Um, in that I think I'm very similar. I'm not the super and the most optimistic person you'll ever meet, but this whole virus situation has definitely lowered my, and a lot of people I've talked to, a lot of people even that aren't even overly political, have lowered people's belief in society as a whole. I've heard that from a lot of people who aren't even overly political. Some people I've never even literally ever, family members I've known my whole life, who I've never heard talk about politics other than the odd off comment, who have been very passionate about this kind of stuff, and that society is going down a very dark path. And this whole virus situation is a classic example of the general public will do whatever the government tells them and not question it no matter what. In fact, you have a lot of people who literally view it as a badge of honor that they are being a sheep led to the slaughter, like the classic example. In that you have these people that, again, they're so naive that they literally would get on the train to Auschwitz if the government told them it's in their best interest, it's to keep you safe. There is a very large percent of the population that would do that, assuming other people would do it, because that's one of the big things too, is that basic human psychology is if you see other people doing it, especially a majority, you think that it's okay and you think that it's a good thing. And that's the problem nowadays, that people are increasingly falling for that trap. So anyway, I mean, I do think it is a good idea to keep the faith. Like, he puts it in a very good way. You have to keep the faith, because the only thing holding the system up is the people that are keeping the faith. Like, the only thing keeping it from completely collapsing is people that are keeping the faith. So um, anyway, I'm going to leave the video there. If you'd like to, make sure to like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got a link in the description. Again, appreciate any donations. But at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last thing, check me out on Twitter. Check me out on BitChute. All the links are in the description, so you can find them all there.